Welcome to a story not just of war and politics, but of unexpected courage, hidden unity, and voices rising from the shadows. This isn't just about Israel's daring midnight strike. It's about how Iran, Lebanon, and everyday people turned shock into strategy and fear into fierce determination. This is not the tale the world expected. It's the truth that left it stunned. Stay with us as we journey deep into the heart of a moment that redefined power, exposed resilience, and reminded us that in every conflict there are stories of strength that refuse to be silenced. In the quiet stillness of the night, when most of the world was asleep, a sudden tremor broke the silence. Not from nature, but from human hands. Israel, in a meticulously calculated operation, launched a midnight strike designed for maximum surprise and minimum reaction time. It wasn't just an air raid, it was a display of precision and psychological strategy. Using advanced surveillance and satellite intelligence, the targets had been marked for weeks. Suspected weapons depots, communication bunkers, and strategic militia command posts located near the southern Lebanese border and areas believed to harbor Iranian logistical cells. The decision to strike at such an hour was not arbitrary. The darkness of night offers cover, both physical and symbolic. It is a time when command structures are assumed to be at their weakest, when leaders are least prepared to respond, and when civilians are most vulnerable. The strike was not just about bombs or missiles. It was a message. The Israeli command structure wanted to reassert deterrence in a region where tensions were constantly escalating. In their view, allowing suspected threats to grow unchecked was not an option. The weapons used were silent, high-tech, with minimized radar signature, designed to bypass most conventional air defenses. Within moments, explosions rocked the outskirts of towns, while surveillance drones circled above, feeding live footage to control centers. But while the physical impact was significant, what followed was far more critical. The world watched as the operation unfolded in silence. No immediate claims, no loud declarations, just smoke, ruin, and unanswered questions. This kind of tactical aggression carried deeper psychological weight. It was meant to remind adversaries of Israel's reach and readiness, and to put doubt in the minds of those coordinating activities from Tehran to Beirut. For citizens in those regions, it disrupted the sense of security and predictability, exposing how swiftly conflict could arrive, even without warning. Yet this move also opened doors to retaliation and further instability. For rarely does a strike of such nature pass without response. It set off a chain of alertness across the region. Regional media outlets began speculating on the next steps. As diplomats scrambled to interpret the intention behind the silence, the strategic timing and surgical precision of this midnight act ensured that the echo would not fade with the sunrise, but would resonate through the days to come. The moment news of Israel's midnight strike spread across the region, many expected a delayed or carefully calculated response from Iran. Historically known for its strategic patience, Tehran had often chosen to retaliate in measured waves, preferring to act through proxies or with diplomatic finesse. But this time, something was different. Within hours of the incident, Iranian command centers were already mobilizing intelligence assets, initiating a counter-strategy that surprised both regional observers and global powers. The first signs came not from the air or ground, but from cyberspace. A surge of cyber intrusions targeted digital infrastructure linked to Israeli surveillance systems, and reports emerged of temporary blackouts in military communication channels. It was a silent but sharp reminder that wars of the future were no longer confined to borders or bombs. Simultaneously, Iranian intelligence operations began activating regional networks, relaying critical information to Lebanese allies and resistance forces embedded across the Syrian corridor. Drones took to the skies, not to attack, but to gather real-time data. Satellite feeds were analyzed in command rooms, lit only by the glow of monitors and tense eyes. Iran's leadership did not wait for political approval or international reaction. It interpreted the strike as a direct signal, and it responded in kind, with precision, speed, and coordination. Strategic ambiguity was replaced with tactical assertion. Instead of a long pause, Tehran's message was clear. Retaliation would not follow old rules. The swiftness of Iran's counter-strategy also revealed a deeper evolution in its military doctrine. No longer content to rely solely on indirect deterrence, the state employed a hybrid method, melding cyber, intelligence, and regional communication networks in real time. It became evident that Iran had not just been preparing for such an event, it had been anticipating it. This readiness reflected months, perhaps years, of silent infrastructure building, discrete digital warfare drills, and interlinked coordination with regional allies. What shocked analysts most was not the scale of the retaliation, but the coordination behind it. Even with missile systems on standby, Iran chose to demonstrate control rather than chaos, capability rather than impulse. Its response carried layers of silence, silent yet forceful, covert yet undeniable. In doing so, Iran shifted the narrative from victimhood to strategic parity, unsettling assumptions and redrawing the balance of expectations in a region already brimming with fragile equations. While the world's gaze remained fixed on Israel and Iran, Lebanon stood quietly at the edge of the unfolding storm. Its landscape often portrayed as fractured, vulnerable, or unprepared. Yet beneath the surface, within the dense hills and forgotten alleyways of southern Lebanon, a quiet resilience had been hardening over time. Local militias, most notably Hezbollah and other affiliated defense cells, had not merely existed in a reactive state. They had been watching, planning, and embedding themselves into the terrain, physically, technologically, and mentally. What many perceived as silence was actually a deep, deliberate preparation for precisely such a moment. As Israeli jets roared overhead during the midnight strike, what followed was not chaos or confusion, but a calculated response pattern. Surveillance drones, previously unseen by most, lifted off from concealed locations, not to attack, but to track and relay. Radar jamming equipment activated discreetly, sending interference signals into the night sky. Communication lines remained intact, as encrypted channels carried instructions across a decentralized network that spanned villages, hillsides, and hidden bunkers. It was a performance of coordination that stunned not only regional observers, but international intelligence circles as well. Lebanon's response was not centralized. Instead, it reflected a distributed intelligence, community-based and strategically autonomous. Young operators, trained in cyber warfare and signal interception, engaged in digital countermeasures, while senior commanders activated contingency plans long prepared for such an escalation. More remarkable was the restraint. No immediate barrage followed the Israeli strike. Instead, the focus remained on observation, documentation, and controlled exposure of capabilities. This restraint wasn't weakness, it was strategic clarity. The regional assumption that Lebanon would remain merely a passive battleground was upended. What was revealed, intentionally or otherwise, was a deeply rooted defense infrastructure that extended far beyond traditional guerrilla tactics. From signal towers disguised as trees to underground storage with advanced surveillance systems, Lebanon's preparedness had reached a level of quiet sophistication. The strike may have been loud, but the response was subtle, like a shadow refusing to flinch. It suggested that Lebanon, long underestimated in conventional assessments, had grown into a theatre of not just resistance, but readiness. The moment did not just expose vulnerabilities, it unveiled an intelligence ecosystem nurtured silently in the shadow of global distractions, ready to shift the nature of engagement in any future confrontation. In the aftermath of the midnight strike, as missiles faded into memory and the dust of destruction began to settle, something unexpected stirred across the region. It was not another round of missiles, nor the deployment of more troops. It was unity. For years, Iran, Lebanon's Hezbollah, and other resistance groups had maintained loose alliances, often tied by ideology and shared opposition, but fractured by regional politics, internal rivalries, and the weight of external pressure. Yet, in the span of hours, the landscape changed. For the first time in years, coordinated messaging, synchronized responses, and a joint strategic posture emerged from Tehran, Beirut, and beyond. The world had expected a fragmented reply, isolated countermeasures, and scattered rhetoric. Instead, it witnessed cohesion. Statements released by spokesmen across the resistance axis used near-identical language, framing the strike as a shared violation and vowing mutual support. Intelligence was exchanged in real time, not as a favor, but as part of a unified command vision. Even in Syria and Iraq, factions aligned themselves under the same narrative. The coordination was not just military, it was political, symbolic, and psychological. For years, global powers had relied on the assumption that divisions among Iran and its regional allies would prevent a consolidated response. But the midnight aggression appeared to have shattered that assumption. The threat had clarified the mission. For observers on the ground, the unity became visible through subtle signs. Radio frequencies aligned across borders. Encrypted networks hummed with joint planning, and diplomatic representatives from different capitals suddenly echoed one another in interviews and press briefings. This wasn't unity born of panic, it was born of preparation. The midnight strike, rather than dividing, had galvanized a shared perception of existential threat, as if the signal to attack had also served as a trigger to activate a deeper level of cooperation. The shock, then, was not in the strength of firepower, but in the symmetry of response. From Tehran's corridors to Lebanon's valleys, there was a shared tempo. This harmony of intent caught global actors off guard, revealing a strategic evolution among groups long described as fragmented. Their coordination didn't require a central command, just shared history, shared struggle, and now a shared enemy on a shared night. The echo of that unity moved faster than any missile, rippling through media outlets, diplomatic conversations, and military analysts' reports, forcing a re-evaluation of the region's true balance of power. Amid the smoke and sirens that followed Israel's midnight strike. A different kind of movement began to unfold, one not directed by governments or armies, but by ordinary people. In Tehran, in Beirut, and across various cities touched by the escalating tensions, civilians emerged not in panic, but in purpose. Streets that had been asleep only hours earlier were now filled with people waving flags, chanting in unison, and lighting candles in defiance. What began as small gatherings soon grew into widespread demonstrations of unity and resilience. It wasn't orchestrated from above, it rose organically from below, driven by a deeply rooted sense of identity and shared history. In Iran, the public narrative quickly shifted from shock to strength. Young people, often perceived as disconnected from the political establishment, used social media to circulate messages of solidarity, calling for peace, dignity, and sovereignty. Hashtags in Farsi and Arabic began trending within minutes, drawing attention not only from local communities, but also from the global diaspora. These voices weren't calling for war. They were asserting the right to exist without fear, without foreign interference, and without becoming pawns in geopolitical games. In Lebanon, where the weight of conflict has long shadowed daily life, citizens carried portraits of lost family members and held hands under banners of national unity. Churches and mosques opened their doors side by side, offering shelter and reflection. Artists painted murals overnight on damaged walls, depicting not destruction, but hope. Young volunteers delivered food and medical aid to families caught in the crossfire, and community leaders issued statements urging calm and collective resilience. It was a rare and powerful moment where the narrative slipped from the hands of state officials and was reclaimed by the people. What truly shocked observers was the speed and scale of this civilian response. It was as if years of suppressed tension had found their release, not in violence, but in visible, disciplined resolve. The sound of sirens was answered not just by air defense systems, but by chants echoing through alleyways and across social platforms. The people refused to be silent. They refused to be collateral. In doing so, they became active participants in shaping the meaning of the moment, pushing back against fear not with weapons, but with presence, unity, and the stubborn hope that voices, when raised together, can change the course of history. In the shadows of midnight, where missiles once traced the sky and fear lingered in silence, a new narrative emerged. One not forged solely by the might of nations, but by the resilience of people and the unspoken strength of unity. What began as a sudden and forceful strike intended to destabilize and divide, instead illuminated a deeper truth. The region, long torn by history and hardship, has not been weakened by its trials. It has been tempered by them. Iran's swift response, Lebanon's quiet preparedness, and the collective coordination of resistance forces painted a portrait not of chaos, but of strategy and solidarity. And above all, the civilians, those who stood not with weapons, but with will, proved that in the face of aggression, the greatest shock can be the refusal to be broken. Thank you for listening to this unfolding story of resilience, resistance, and rebalance. May we continue to observe, reflect, and seek understanding in a world that too often rushes to judgment. Good luck on your journey, and thank you for choosing to see beyond the headlines.